Hey, and just like that, good afternoon.
Wow.
Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you, Scott?
Doing good. Summer has set in here in Metro Atlanta area. The
Yes.
heat is back. Who knows? Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that'll kill off some of these things that we're dealing with. But regardless, really excited about today's conversation. We've got not just a leading expert and mover and shaker in the world of warehousing, fulfillment, and automation robotics, but as we love, he's a repeat guest, right?
Yeah. And robotics and repeat guest, right? I don't know why I'm just fascinated by robotics right now and the changes that it's making and allowing and the gap that it's filling, right? Because of physical distancing and things like that. So yeah, let's get him on here.
Well, it is a hot sector for sure. But looking forward to having Jeff Cashman with GreyOrange with us here momentarily. Before we bring him on, real quick programming note.
Yes, Scott.
So if you enjoyed the live stream, be sure to check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Today we shared the latest episode of the Supply Chain Buzz. That was Monday, that featured David Schillingford, chairman of Resilience 360. You don't want to miss that.
Yeah. Another great conversation. Resilience and agility. If you don't know the difference, watch this episode because you will learn.
That's right. And you can get that wherever you get your podcast from. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. Okay. Real quick, we've got folks already tuned in, Sylvia and Benjamin, Cigar and Stefan. Good afternoon to each of you, and you're in for a treat. So, Clay, with no further ado, let's bring in Mr. Jeff Cashman with GreyOrange. Hey, Jeff, good afternoon. How you doing?
Hey, Scott. Hey, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good. Don't you love that swoosh, Jeff?
I just love that swoosh. I followed that.
It makes you feel so welcome.
Surprise.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet. Now, for folks that may have missed your last appearance with us, and I think, hey, you're building on your appearances at Supply Chain Now. I think this is your fourth, if I'm keeping count.
Wow.
So most folks know that you serve as Senior VP and Chief Operating Officer with GreyOrange, one of the leading automation firms in industry. But let's assume maybe they missed those podcasts, or maybe they've had their head in the hole like I've been accused of from time to time. Let's get to know you a little bit better, Jeff. Tell us about your background, and we'll talk about GreyOrange here momentarily.
Yeah, really good. Thanks again, guys, for having me. So I've been in and around supply chain technologies for 20 plus years, and specifically from a consulting perspective and some very large enterprise software providers, and always in and around retail and big brands. So we've seen a lot of transformation over the years, and I've seen it on a global basis, started in Chicago, from Tokyo to Atlanta. So I've seen a good part of kind of the world and what supply chain technologies and the evolutions of that technologies, and specifically in warehousing, distribution, and fulfillment. So that's my background. Been in Atlanta since 1994, and like you said, it's hot.
It is, and the sector is incredibly hot. GreyOrange, again, one of the industry leaders. They've been working with a ton of warehouses and distribution centers and fulfillment centers to try to keep up with the historic level of demand we're seeing. Right, Greg?
Yeah.
So beyond all that, though, what else? For folks that may not have caught the last episode, what else really stands out about the GreyOrange organization from where you sit?
Yeah, a couple things. I think what we're doing in this innovation front, this real-time optimization, very, very intelligent software integrated to the robots, is very different, right? Versus a robot hanging off of some software. This is integrated. Software learns from the robot learns from the software, and as that learning continues to evolve, they get smarter. The operation gets smarter. So what I think about that, and then the application towards, we're very focused on retail and big brands, and that's where this massive transformation that has been kind of sneaking up on us. We're in the middle of it right now, and it's full on. So that's where GreyOrange has been very, very effective, and we're doing this at scale.
Mm.
We don't do a lot. We don't do pilots. These are operations that are mission critical for our customers. So that's what we've been doing. We've been in the States here just a little over 2 years, and we've got a great strategic systems integration partner with XPO, and we do have a global operation. People may not understand that. We're in the United States. We're also in Japan and a large operation in India. So we are a global operation, and
you well. And one more here. The one and only Chris Barnes of Supply Chain is Boring, who also was the first individual here to interview Jeff Cashman on Supply Chain now. Probably, 2 years, forever ago it feels. But Chris, hope this finds you well. All right. So you talked about the global pandemic. That is certainly been the backdrop for all things civilization for months now. So let's break out the crystal ball, because if let's say it's 2025 and folks are looking back and they're talking about, hey, I wish there was one thing I could have better prepared for in 2020, given the global pandemic. What would that answer be, especially from an automation and robotics and supply chain leadership standpoint, Jeff?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. 2025, looking back on a pandemic we haven't seen in ever, and the impact that it's having. First and foremost, just the massive learning that I think our customers are going through right now. And that's the ability for this idea of being agile, flexible, the ability to move versus being stuck in channels. So we kind of use the concept of the ability to flex and then flip. Flex, what I mean is our current customers are seeing their businesses running at peak volumes now, right? So think about Turkey 5, basically Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and now our customers have been running at peak for the last 3 months, right? So that's the flex. I've got to be able to scale up and be able to address what's in front of our ability to serve right now, and then the ability to flip. That what I mean by that is move from channels, not necessarily locked into the retail channel. I got to unlock that retail inventory and make it available to e-commerce. How do I unlock it? How do I flip it in that quick versus, oh my gosh, I've got this rigid automation drilled to the floor and I've got to basically live with it. And that's where I think a lot of the if I'm sitting in 2025, they're sitting in 2025. I need to build into my distribution network that ability to flex and flip very, very quickly based on the dynamics of my customer. Because at the end of the day, that customer is truly driving this massive transformation.
Yep. Hey, flex and flip is a message that we could all get behind.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's exactly what I thought. I thought that is really concise, and I think it drives the point home nicely.
Yep. Hey, Greg, before you dive in here, Memory, good afternoon. Great to have you here tuned in. Memory's tuned in from Johannesburg. Patrick Kelly, the Produce Guy podcast. Good stuff there. Patrick, great to have you. And Daniela, greetings to you. Thanks for joining us on LinkedIn. And one more, Syed. Syed is based in Pakistan. He's doing some really neat programming. Greg, you and I look forward to being with him in August. Okay.
Brain, right? We're going to be on a show with him, right?
That's right. August 14th. So back to flex and flip. Greg, I know that speaks to you too.
Well, I mean, you're addressing the next question I have. We've said this so many times. Pivot. Necessity is the mother of invention. All of these things that have been forced on us because of these challenging times. So what I'd like to understand is what are you seeing in terms of fulfillment and supply chain? I know we're seeing a lot, but I'd like to understand from your perspective what you all are seeing and how the companies you're engaging with are responding.
Yeah. So a couple different things. One is kind of, okay, what's happening within my network? And what can I do within my network, my current kind of infrastructure from a DC fulfillment center, even forward fulfillment centers? What can I do with that infrastructure to allow them to be more nimble, right? It doesn't have to be a big piece of automation replacement. What can we do to be more nimble? So we're seeing a lot of our customers and our prospects talking about, okay, what can I do with what I have? and become more nimble. Therefore, leveraging my current asset base, right? The second piece, kind of the next step of that is, what am I doing about micro fulfillment? This is a bit, we chatted a little bit about that in our last conversation, but it's the real thing. And so the flex and flip piece, because I may have been rigid in automation, I'm going to just go find different ways to deliver within market. So that micro fulfillment, what am I going to do with opening up, leveraging the retail footprints that I have, whether that's the entire retail footprint, like a dark store, or whether that's going to be just the storage room, and making that now agile and flexible. We're seeing many of our customers and prospects talking about what can we do with what I have at the DC level, but then also in market for these micro fulfillment strategies that they're now in the process of deploying. And here's the reality of it, and that is that we're currently running at peak. What is this next peak
right
going to look like? Is it going to be flatline from where we are, or are we going to see it increase? And the answer is there's going to be an increase. And the belief is it's going to have a similar, if not more, order of magnitude than in the past. So what are we going to do to meet that demand? Because the expectations aren't going down from you and I as consumers.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think part of the answer is we don't know, because consumers don't know, right? And that's why the flexibility that you're talking about is so important.
Right. Yeah,
right. We have physical distancing constraints. We have the concerns about people, whether they can or will show up for work. I think we're somewhat past that, but you never know, right? As you said earlier, it's kind of, we're kind of operating with a foot on the brake and one on the gas, right?
Right.
Yeah. And the people are just literally coming off of steering committee calls with our customers, and there's no shows. I mean, they have sheets of no shows right now. And so they have full-time recruiters out in market trying to fill shifts. And it's just been very, very difficult for now. So what about 4 months from now?
Yep.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit. I think we understand that robotics help with micro fulfillment, meaning from the stores or forward positions where you're very, very close to the consumer. And I think that's an advantage, by the way, for traditional retailers, because there's a service center really close to the consumer, and the consumer can choose whether they want to go in store, pick up curbside, they have a place to return it. I think there's a really nice dynamic there. But as we're talking about the human capital, the people aspect of it, as robotics, this is probably leading up to 2025, Jeff, as robotics become more and more prevalent in the workplace, what do you see as the human robotic dynamic, and how do companies respond to that in terms of how they recruit, how they train, how they skill and position people in roles and that sort of thing?
Right. Now, I think so that line of questioning, the way we're thinking about it at GreyOrange is we're thinking about it, not necessarily, the robotics are important, absolutely important, but what's really important is the software behind it, and providing that level of flexibility and the ability to flip very, very quickly. The robot is going to do what it's going to do based on the instructions of the software. This software, the Gray Matter software that we offer, is providing incredible amounts of real-time optimization on the fulfillment center floor, within our field and outside of our field of operation. So when you start to think about that as the fulfillment operating system, right? The fulfillment operating system, how is my fulfillment center going to operate across multiple technologies, multiple automation, and people? That's where we're going to create this real-time optimization to drive the value of that fulfillment center, to meet the promise of the customer. With that being said, when you think about that interaction with people, we look at this as a huge advantage, because there's many of our current customers and their associates that are looking at this as a job to build career based on brand new technology, and not just working with the robots, but understanding how a fulfillment center is going to operate under this new software, under this new platform.
Right.
in as of itself, it creates a learning opportunity, and it creates an ability to create a career path that they have that a lot of the associates and management haven't necessarily seen in the past. So we think, and we're hearing from our customers, that there's a tremendous amount of synergy with and advantageous to hiring and bringing new associates and new management on because of the technology and what it's able to bring and what it will bring in the future.
Hey, real quick, Greg, before we continue, I want to recognize a couple of comments coming from the audience here. So Nerfad and Benjamin are debating the impact that automation and robotics would have with the Power Rangers. So I'll save that for
with the Power Rangers.
Yes, I'll save that for later in the show. Let's see here. So Jamin, our dear friend Jamin, who's kicking off a logistics and transportation focus series, says, hey, focused on agile and what's the next peak is such a clutch way to be looking at it. Good stuff there from Jamin. Joseph Moretta, who is a board member for an Apex chapter up in the Northeast, is with us. So good afternoon, Joseph Moretta. Thanks for joining us. And one more here. Jeffrey Miller says, seems like micro fulfillment is going to continue to require stronger, faster demand, sales transaction visibility. And visibility, if we've heard that 1 million times before the pandemic, we're going to hear that 2 million times in the months to come. Right, Jeff?
Right. Yeah, I think visibility, and it's a great point. The lack of visibility, and then the ability and the lack of predictability. Right.
Yep.
Okay, I see it, but what am I going to do about it? And what is the level of confidence that I have to actually do that, right? And I think that's where there is a lot of question around. I see all the planning, I see all these great application systems that we have in place, but how do I get to the sense of real predictability? Historically, it's been on people.
Yeah.
Are they going to be? Do I have enough bodies to do the work to get it done? In the future, we're going to start talking about this powerful software driving the automation and driving the fulfillment center to fundamentally be predictable. And we chatted about this in the last conversation. We're finally seeing where planning and execution are now together on the fulfillment center floor, which provides that level of predictability.
One of the things we got to do there, if we really want to establish predictability, is we have to start forecasting the right thing. In supply chain, we so often talk about items and how this item is trending, or what this item is doing, or this item's seasonality. And the truth is, we're not predicting items at all. We're predicting the consumer. And finally, there's enough data available to help us to do that, or at least to blend the two techniques. So that when we can actually predict what the consumer is doing, that's when we can create the responsiveness, the agility, and the resilience that delivers what they're after. So that's going to be a key shift, Jeff, as you all integrate more and more with planning systems, is to help the systems have to help feed one another more and more data about the consumers.
Well, let's just take that as a great example, and I'm going to move to the fulfillment center floor. So now I'm hitting demand. So orders are dropping to the floor. We're now starting to see the demand, the affinity for a SKU. We call this slotting.
Yeah.
The affinity for a SKU, but we're doing that in real time, right? So the affinity for the SKU, we're doing it on the execution platform, and then to your point, Greg, the ability to take that data, and this is what actually happened, and push that right back up to the planning systems to take real data, real actual demand versus a plan.
Yeah. Well, and I think, our responsibility, Jeff and I have worked on our respective sides of this for, what did we decide to say, Jeff? Over 2 decades?
2 decades is the top we could talk about.
But I think, imagine what I imagine the world being able to do before 2025, but hopefully by 2025, is to realize that affinity, that pattern that's being recognized in the warehouse, is because Kim Kardashian tweeted about this product. And instead of us going, that product is trending, we go, Kim Kardashian is having an influence on these consumers. And then we start to watch for what she talks about next. And then we provide preemptive signals to the distribution center to be able to reconfigure to account for that demand.
And it's now. It's not tomorrow. It's not today. I got to do it now because the demand is popping because of that tweet that she just sent off.
Yeah.
What are you going to do
today? Well, I'm glad Corinne Bursa is sounding off because I'd love to hear what she says about this, because today there's a hurdle between execution and planning, and that's the ERP, because we both get our data from that. And what we need to be able to do is wire those systems together in real time and not have to wait from word from on high, right? But to be able to respond to what's happening intraday.
Yes. Hey, real quick, Greg, we've got a great question from Jeff Miller, and you both of y'all spoke to this a little bit, but I want to pose this to Jeff here. So Jeff Miller asked specifically as it relates to BOPIS, which is one of our new favorite acronyms: buy online, pick up in store. As that expands, what info? And hopefully I'm not getting too ahead of us here, but what info does GreyOrange see as really important to efficiency and predictability? Y'all both touched on it, but what else would you add to those your insights there?
Well, a couple of things. One is as we start to see the order demand start coming in, and now we happen to be in a micro fulfillment center, I think is what we're talking about here. Now we're starting to see it by a region, right? We're starting to see it by some zone, and within that zone, we're able now to start to drive the affinity. And what I mean by affinity is basically where's that inventory and my ability to pick it, right, in our world, right? And so what we do is when we start to move the inventory around, because the inventory is always in motion. Inventory is not stagnant. Inventory is always in motion. And as the inventory is moving around, it may be in different locations, but over time it gets close to each other. So that I'm going to pick this shirt, and I'm going to pick this pair of slacks, and we start to see the affinity for the shirt and the slacks. They're going to be very, very close to each other. So I don't have to pick and wait. It's going to be pick and move. Right. So that's efficiency, right? If you take a step back and you say, okay, outside of that particular field, let's think about how we're going to replenish to the field. So I start thinking about deep storage down or inbound cross dock. What does that start to look like? We all start to look at the entire fulfillment center based on that inventory affinity, and where should that inventory go as it comes in the door, or as it's coming down from the deep storage down into the pick area, whether it's ours or whether it's another piece of automation. So that's how I think about what data we're going to collect and the action we're going to take based on that to fundamentally drive the efficiency within this micro fulfillment or even at the DC level.
I have to ask this question. I know I have one more question, but I have to ask this question because you just made me think of this, Jeff. The possibility exists that with advanced robotics and this real-time planning, execution, integration, it seems to me there is a possibility that WMS, or at least WMS as we know it, ceases to exist. What's your thought on that?
I don't know. I've got a bias. I think the warehouse management solutions that are in place today serve the market well, and they serve their customers well. I think as we partner with many warehouse management software companies, when we think about how we integrate to them, I think that's going to be interesting on where we're going to be able to drive the optimization across that fulfillment center, and at what point, where do we want to think about the inventory? Where do we want to think about the orders? And I believe that's always going to be at the enterprise level because you're going to continue to look at that at an enterprise level. But when you get down onto the fulfillment center floor or on the micro fulfillment center, how are we going to actually execute that? That's where I think that's what we will do, and that's how we will execute it and fundamentally work in collaboration with that WMS. There's some WMSs that have less functionality, some have more functionality. So at the end of the day, that customer is going to kind of dial it in to say, this is what I want to achieve and how I will achieve it with the providers that could meet my requirements, that are going to be meeting my customers' requirements the best.
Hey, real quick. So one of y'all mentioned Kim Kardashian. Nirfad says he just knew that Kim had something to do with all of this here. So good stuff there from Nirfad. Chris Barnes really liked your inventory analogy as it relates to the airplane. And Jamin again says, hey, this is a fascinating conversation. super point about social media influencer tracking and data. I just keep thinking about real-time data and 3D printing opportunities. Good stuff there from Jamin. Okay, so Greg, I think we're going to take we've kind of looked ahead, and now I think we're going to kind of look in the rearview mirror, right?
Yeah, so I want to take a quick look back. So, Jeff, I don't know if you know this, but you were at a company, not sure if we're supposed to mention, and I was working with a firm that did integrations of that company, and we were working with Staples back when they were one of Kiva's very first customers, and Kiva kind of kicked off this whole automated vehicle thing in warehouses, right? So, and that was back when, by the way, Staples was the second largest e-commerce company in the world. My, how times have changed, right?
Right.
But it's been 9 years. For anyone who doesn't know, Amazon bought Kiva and took them off the market, took it away from Staples, as a matter of fact, took them off the market. And then there was this great gap of automation in the marketplace for a number of years while Amazon kind of outran everybody for a while, right? So if you fast forward today, and now there are many more players like yourselves in the marketplace, and a lot of this is happening in fulfillment, and you guys have a big part of it. The Amazon has been able to establish the Amazon effect, right? And now we consumers are used to, it's in our psyche. Mm-hmm. A 2-day, a 1-day, or even a 2-hour delivery. How do you think that what you're doing enables companies who compete with Amazon? And why do you think it took so long for other robotics companies to kind of come around? There is no patent, by the way, on Kiva's products, so there wasn't that hindrance there.
Right. A couple things. So I don't believe we're like a lot of other robotics companies. I think we're very different, and I'll come back to that in a second. Look, the facts about Amazon and Amazon Robotics, they bought the company, they bought Kiva that began Amazon Robotics. You know, the data would tell you that there's 400,000 Amazon Robotics in their facilities. Okay, and they're basically building and deploying 100,000 plus a year. Okay.
Yeah.
Flip over to the other side and look at retailers and e-commerce providers. Maybe a total in market of robotics in field today, 5,000. 5,000. 400,000 going to 600,000 and 5,000. Now look, Amazon's pretty straightforward. From a use case perspective, it's e-commerce, and they have hardwired it and it hums. And quite frankly, the platform that they've built their integrated WMS into their WES and their robotics is a hardwired solution. And oh, by the way, it works, right? When you start to look at what we're doing, that's exactly our platform. And what we're doing is fundamentally being the arms agents. We're basically selling the weapons to compete against Amazon. And what are you going to do that, right? You have to arm yourself, right? And the way you have to arm yourself is with this very powerful software integrated to robotics, right? Hopefully it's ours and others, but the idea is you have to move. When Amazon took those Kiva basically out of the market, I'll never forget a call I got from a CIO at a very large retailer, and he goes, "Now what do I do?" Oh, by the way, that was 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Nothing. So
Yeah.
I think the answer is, and it goes back to my earlier comment about flex and flip. We kind of got away with it. Kind of fake it till you make it until you get punched in the face.
Right.
and it happened. And
right.
The pandemic's it's an incredibly difficult environment. We have people out in the field. We have a ton of people that are on the front lines right now doing incredible work. But this is about massive change. And now there is this incredible catalyst that it will happen. If it doesn't happen, you just won't be around. This is the way it's going to be. Beforehand, it was, well, you can make it, get there, omni-channel, slowly evolve. And even when you dug into the omni-channel customers, they were still operating 2 separate inventories, 2 separate cycles, 2 separate facilities, And today that just isn't going to make it. So now we're in this process of you're going to have to adopt. Robotics are clearly going to be in the solution set as they start to roll out these new distribution networks. It's going to happen. And with that, these customers, these prospects have to think about it in a way that they're going to be able to think about the fulfillment center as an entity or the fulfillment node as an entity, whether that's a center or whether that's a micro fulfillment point. The reality is you've got to think about these nodes as the ability of how we're going to be able to truly drive that automation, truly drive the expectations of the consumers, because it's not going back. I was on a call yesterday speaking to somebody. They're now referring to, because there's a sense of people are going to start leaving the urban environments and moving out, but you've got these 18-hour cities. Right. It's not a day. It's not 2 days. I got to make it, how am I going to get there in 18 hours? Right. So there's this whole concept of not only where we were kind of the distribution network was focusing on, let's get closer to urban environments. Now we're starting to pivot back out or move back out into some more rural environments. How are we going to meet the same demand in a less concentrated area?
Yep. All right. So Greg, I know you're dying to jump into the ABA component there. Let's circle back. I want to share a couple comments, some interesting comments from the audience here. So Chris, really, this is the second comment he's made on this phrase you used, Jeff, fulfillment operating systems. He loves it. Maybe that's going to be a new thing. It'll be in the Apex dictionary before we know it. Who knows?
Right. Chris Barnes is a distribution guy too. Right. In retrospect, I realized we probably should have had him on
That's
here
right.
as well.
That's right. He is a warehouse guru, saving the world one warehouse at a time. All right. So Keith Moore here really latched on to what y'all were talking about a minute ago, and Greg in particular. He really found that comment about WMS systems maybe ceasing to exist be an interesting one. And I'm going to read this for our audience, our audio listeners, if they are not tuned in. Keith says that would be a massive exercise in change management, unlikely to occur over the next 10 years. It is much more likely we see WMS systems either transition to accounting systems or use WMS accelerators, or those vendors begin to heavily invest in execution systems. So, Greg, why don't you weigh in on Keith's perspective there? And Jeff, of course, feel free to piggyback as well.
Well, let me say what I bet Jeff is thinking, and Jeff is probably thinking, I hope they acquire. Because that's what I think will happen is, the tyranny of the or. You're either mobile or you're stationary. It's going to be replaced by the freedom of the and. You're mobile and stationary, and that's exactly what Jeff and GreyOrange are doing. Is, you can have a warehouse that, if today demand is largely distribution driven, right? We're largely B2B today, but on the next day we've got more B2C demand. You can reconfigure using robotics and racking and mobile racking and all of that sort of thing. So I see that happening. The infrastructure, and as Jeff, you talked about, the backbone of WMS, its ability to be real time, to manage data real time, and to configure for optimization in the warehouse is a great driver for the tool set that you've got. So there's an incredible synergy there. I think
there's incredible synergies, but I'm gonna disagree vehemently with you. There's no posturing for acquisition here, right? Nobody, honest to God. There's nobody in the industry today that's addressing the problem how we're addressing it. And fundamentally, to Chris Barnes' point, and fundamentally the point we're making is this is a new industry, and the scale at which we believe the adoption is going to happen to this industry is massive. And so our partners that we work with, whether they are the large systems integrators, the large ERPs, software providers, are going to be great partners. And I think to the point made a little bit earlier about the idea of what happens to a WMS, what happens to EWM and SAP, it kind of becomes who they have been, right? And that is that they're kind of the corporate inventory and the accounting system that they are, but they can't get to the execution. It's a really, really good planning system, but they can't get to the execution. And that's where we're coming from. The execution and then the operating system around what that means within the fulfillment center. And the fulfillment operating system is something we've been talking about. And as I think about all the operations that go on within a fulfillment center, whether it's e-commerce, an omni-channel, or a single channel B2B, the reality is that fulfillment center is only going to become more and more complex with levels of automation to basically drive these levels of efficiency that are a must-have. It's not, I'm going to try to be there. Customers won't allow that to happen. The customer is going to demand, I need it today, or I need it yesterday. And the reality is that's not getting any sooner. So I really believe that this fulfillment operating system is a market that has been addressed.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing.
That's a weakness of a lot of WMSs today. They're really, really good at B2B distribution. They're not as strong on consumer fulfillment. So that is a great complement of the two systems to one another.
All right. So folks are weighing in left and right. Nerfod said from this episode, he's going to write an 800-page book entitled What I've Learned from Jeff. And then Benjamin replied, hey, can I get a copy? So you've got some fans already here, Jeff. So thanks for keeping it light and jovial, Nerfod and Benjamin. Want to say high five to Keith Moore for weighing in on that WMS perspective. So good stuff there. Jeff Miller says, hey, Jeff hits the nail on the head. The days of fat channel and point of sale inventories are gone forever. Fulfillment channels are going to grow less and less forgiving of inefficiencies. Jeff is so right. Good stuff there from Jeff Miller. And Chris is a big fan of fat channel, the term. Good stuff there, Chris. And I had one other thing I was going to share with you here to you both. And I've lost it in the comments here. Chris says, hey, here's an example. WMS used to depend on waves. Wave management made everything better. The future is streaming orders, not waving orders. Agree, disagree, and really quick here because we're going to move right along. But Jeff, agree, disagree?
It's waveless. It doesn't. Waves are a way for old batch systems to kind of catch up and drop them to the floor and allow the planning system to fundamentally do that. And our system's a waveless system. It's continuously optimizing, continuously moving within milliseconds of coming up with decisions. So Chris is spot on. Order streaming, even to that point, we're working with several customers that wave every 2 minutes. Right?
Right, which is essentially streaming.
Fundamentally, what are you doing? Is it real-time optimization? Is it waveless? Which we've been talking about for a long, long time, how you actually achieve it. And the only way you can do this with a platform that leverages this real-time optimization, and we do that on our technology platform. It's built on a very unique language called Erlang, and that's what it's built for. It is a real-time optimization engine, fault tolerant at scale.
All right, so go waveless, flex and flip, pick and move. We've got a bunch of T-shirt isms coming out of this episode. I love it, Jeff. Hey, so you were talking about modernizing, and I want to get you to weigh in on how modernizing fulfillment is impacting how we measure success. But before we do that, Benjamin asked a great question, and I'm going to pose this to you. And if there's nothing you can speak to, Jeff, we can take it offline. But Benjamin asked, hey, what have been the most common barriers for execution that you have seen with clients moving toward micro?
Yeah, the barriers to execution is can they get the inventory there? It's about the inventory. Can I get the inventory there? And technology. How am I going to get the orders there? How am I going to get the orders there? It's pretty simple. It's an integration problem, right? So you'd think this is pretty straightforward, but when you kind of dig back into the systems of many of our customers, the application stack, it's actually a fairly antiquated application stack. And therefore, how do I actually get those orders down to that particular micro fulfillment center? So I would tell you it's technology and the integration piece and parts of it. And then secondly, the idea of actually how I'm actually going to get the inventory there, because they're coming out of fulfillment centers, and how am I going to get them down to that micro center? That's probably easier to solve than number one.
I love it. Great question, Benjamin. Great question. Kevin Bell is on the live stream. Kevin, hope this finds you well. A great attorney that's doing a lot of business helping companies revet their global supply chains here in recent months. So Kevin, hope this finds you well. Okay. taking a breath. What's that, Greg?
Another T-shirtism from Kevin Bell.
Yes, go ahead and share it.
Take advantage of an opportunity without being opportunistic.
Right. So true. All right. So we're talking about, in many ways, modernizing fulfillment. So two questions for you, two-part question. First off, how does that help, or how do you see that changing how we measure success, especially as it relates, second part here, to some of the traditional ways we track performance in fulfillment centers?
Yeah. I think, first and foremost, it's going to be about revenue and customers, the NPS scores of how my customers see me, us, the brand. How do we do what we said we were going to do? How do we keep the promise we said we were going to keep? Right? How do we do it? And how well are we doing? The core driver behind that's revenue, right? How are we going to see and start measuring revenue, right? So we see what's happened in retail and fundamentally the acceptance of that. But when you get into this new world, the conversion factor of you actually met the promise you said, I therefore going to order from you again, create that loyalty, create that long-term customer because you did what you said you were going to do. And that means you're meeting or exceeding my expectations as a consumer. And in this instance is how I got it and when I got it, right? In the right condition, and was it at the right time or before, right? So I think that's a revenue and kind of an NPS score of how consumers are viewing us as a brand. I think the store impact is pretty massive because stores aren't going away. Right? They're not going to go away. They're going to serve a different purpose and quite frankly, will still serve the purpose of retail shopping. But when we start to think about that, we want to start to talk about that as store-ready fulfillment, right? So how am I going to make it more efficient of fulfilling the store? And today, basically, I've got my fixed route to a store. I'm loading up the truck with the retail orders for the week. I'm putting it on a truck. It's showing up at the store. I've got people in the back room sorting through it, putting it on pallets, taking it out to the floor, putting it on a shelf. Don't need any more. We should be basically creating floor-ready, shelf-ready inventory right out of the fulfillment center. You can. We're doing it today for one of our customers, right? And with that, we move from a 24 to 36-hour time to get product from DC to shelf to less than 2.
Love that.
Massive.
Wow.
It's massive, right?
Yes.
And so, and as I brought this up to some of the prospects I've talked to, some of the long-term customers that I've known, chief supply chain officers, this is a little bit of a barrier. Oh, they go, we got to go talk to the stores guy about that.
Right.
What? So anyways, that's going to get broken down. That's just is, they all see it. Now, how do you go solve that particular problem? The problem's solved. How do you go implement it and actually drive that significant benefit? So that's another KPI. How efficient are we being for our customer, the store, therefore driving value that way? And then the last piece is that consumer piece, I think, around NPS, how the consumer thinks about us, and really, when did it arrive at my doorstep? And truly create that, met the promise that we made to them.
All right, NPS, you got it. Just in a quick nutshell for folks that may be newer to industry, don't know what NPS is. Explain what Net Promoter Score real quick it would be.
Fundamentally, it's how we do it, right? And it's a way that you can do that in a very simple, quick way. I don't know if you guys are using, open table or all these other different metrics, Yelp. You're basically starring people up and you're starring them down and you're writing some comments. And you're taking that with real authentic data and then applying it, right? And I think that's going to be very, very impactful for how our customers are starting to measure their customers, or their customers measuring them, and how they've actually met the promise they said they're going to meet.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. So a couple comments here. Chris was talking about, as you were describing how you were really streamlining warehouse and fulfillment operations. Chris talks about reducing product touches, right? We're for years, we've been after reducing every touch possible. And gosh, to take that down from 36 hours to 2 hours, incredibly powerful, Jeff. Let's see here. We had one other comment here from Benjamin. Crazy that a simple solution as store-ready products can save so much time and energy. Good stuff there from Benjamin. Okay, Greg, before I ask this next question about how else is Jeff seeing organizations really kind of inoculate the business and the operation, like for COVID-19. Quick commentary on what he was just sharing in terms of modernizing fulfillment and some of these big ways are moving the needle. I mean, can you imagine from 36 hours to 2 hours, the impact that would have?
I think the interesting insight is Jeff, you commented on something I found, and frankly, it was at Staples almost 20 years ago. And that is that when e-commerce came around, there was this false barrier put up because the store operations guy, right, the VP of store ops, did not want e-commerce to even though e-commerce was then fulfilled from the distribution center, they didn't want e-commerce dragging down the efficiency of their organization or impacting their inventory or bonus metrics in particular. So a lot of traditional retailers have this false wall between e-com and store operations, where we should be looking at them as the same fulfillment center for however the customer wants to buy. It's not e-commerce, it's just commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And the store is a fulfillment center regardless of whether the customer wants to come in or have it delivered or pick it up on the curb.
That's right. Right.
So that will have to change. And as you said, Jeff, that false wall is going to come slamming to the ground very shortly in a lot of these retailers.
I like what you just shared there, Greg, because we've been putting this E in front of commerce for so long because it was so different. But as it continues to grow, that's going to be life as we know it. That's commerce. What a great point. All right. So I want to ask, as we start to wrap up here, Jeff, there's so many different ways. We're going to have you back for another couple hours. But what else is out there? What else are you seeing organizations or leadership do to really, inoculate their business, their operations, their workforce against the impacts of COVID-19 and this environment that's not going anywhere?
Yeah, I think there's this reality of this is the new normal. We talked a little bit about new normals coming out of 08, 09 recession, and it's going to be a new normal. And we kind of went back to where we were. This is generationally impactful, right? Not only were my daughters already pushing us to e-commerce, but now I'm shopping on e-commerce. I mean, we've got older folks that have now adopted that way. That's happening. So the reality is it's happened, right? And I don't believe there's no going back, right? And why? Why would the consumer give up that
conveniences they've gained? Yeah,
the convenience and by the way, others that are meeting the promise that they've made. So they order from Amazon for a reason. They get what they want when they want it, right? So how are these other retailers going to basically arm themselves to do the same or better, right? And therefore create that promise that they have to happen. And so I think that's not going back. So what's happened, and I think with the chief supply chain officers are now starting to get their legs underneath them. And they were talking about, in our last conversation, we chatted about these next distribution networks. They were going to roll out in the next 5-7 years.
Right.
That's now 3 to 5. 3 to 5. And we've got to go to basically implement that. Now, what does that mean? We've got to think out of the box. It doesn't mean, okay, let's go find another location. Let's go build another facility. That'll be 3 years before it's up and running and truly driving the value that we need. We're going to have to move more quickly. How do I leverage the assets that I have? We talked about that earlier. What are the assets? They're inventory nodes, whether that be a fulfillment center that I have. How do I convert that from a retail facility to an e-commerce or an omni-channel facility, right? How do we think about that as a building versus a channel, right? And I think that's really, really important, and that's happening. So the distribution, how they're changing, is clearly underway. I think the way they want to procure, and this is kind of a question for us in the industry, is how do you want to procure is also starting to, have conversations. Going through the large capital budgeting process, the release of capital, getting that out onto getting that now go through the acquisition process. It has to be quicker. We can't be locked up in long-term procurement efforts because that's only slowing us down from achieving the objective that we have to achieve. So I think there's there's a sense of urgency and purpose about how can we do this in a different way, maybe a subscription model.
Right.
It's a different of a hybrid versus some capital. But the reality is, don't slow me down.
Right.
Make this frictionless and allow us basically to move quickly. And that's a challenge to GreyOrange in the industry. How are we going to make this frictionless, and how are we going to fundamentally enable these chief supply chain officers to move more quickly? So those are the things I think about. I think the first question you asked about 2025, looking back at 2020, I think a lot of folks are like, I can't even think about what's going to happen at the end of this year versus 2025. But there is this reality, and when we speak to these chief supply chain officers, they are getting this vision now. The message is clear. We're going to have to service this customer, me and you as consumers, in a very, very different way that we've served them before. We're going to be measured very, very differently than before. Yes, we still have to be efficiency. Those are table stakes. Less touches, more efficient labor, the ability to push more automation and drive more throughput with less.
Right.
That's going to happen. So I think those are the challenges that I think the chief supply chain officers are seeing, and they're fundamentally already beginning to act that way. I think we're going to see another couple, 3 or 4 months before they actually get to the point of bringing that to resolution, but it's happening.
Yep. Jeff Miller says friction manifests as inventory. Good comment there from Jeff. So there's a ton of interest, Jeff Cashman, we're not going to be able to get to today due to time, but I want to tee up my next question here. So Clay picked up on the warehouse that I believe GreyOrange is really embracing, which I love. He was asking more about that. And Chris was asking more. Tell us more about the robots. We're not going to have time for that, but for
Tell
folks,
me a story.
Tell me a story. For folks that do want to learn more, either they want to connect with you, and because Nerfod is going to be writing a big book, he's going to need a lot more time with you, Jeff, or they want to learn more about GreyOrange. I know that y'all have a variety of resources. Where can folks connect with you and learn more about GreyOrange?
Yeah, head to the website. So GreyOrange.com, good website, got a lot of rich content, got some videos. You want to see the robots in action. You know, I think one of the videos you also see, and one of the conversations we're starting to have is around dark warehouses, dark fulfillment centers. Something we could take up on the next discussion, but that is becoming not only visionary, but what we're going to go do about it. And then also you can reach me at jeff.c@greyorange.com.
Outstanding. Every time we sit down with Jeff, Greg, I feel like despite everything we cover, we're still just surface level on everything else that he brings to the table, all the other experiences and what they're doing in the marketplace. You get the same feeling?
No doubt. I mean, Jeff's been in the industry, as we said, almost 2 decades.
You're kind.
And has been in a lot of different areas of the industry. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot more depth there, but the thing that I think people need to understand is all of that depth is being applied to this business problem at GreyOrange right now.
Yeah.
And that's going to be to the benefit of all of us who either are in the retail trade or who buy from the retail trade. So yeah, I'm glad, frankly, that you're on our side, Jeff.
That's right. Hey, here's a quick challenge to the audience. I love what we were taught, what Jeff was talking earlier about, these new customer expectations, which are really new ways of organizations finding ways to use technology and other means to serve the customer better. So to folks that are tuned in, put in your comments, if there's one thing that a retailer is doing or a company you do business with is doing to go above and beyond, especially using technology, throw that in the comments. Or if you don't catch it here in the live stream, you can go over to our Supply Chain Now Insiders group on LinkedIn and tell us about it, because we'd love to learn more about the technologists making that happen, much like what Jeff was sharing about their super smart robots and automation at GreyOrange, and really the platform that powers it, which as you were talking about, Jeff, is so important. Okay, so Jeff Cashman, SVP and Chief Operating Officer with GreyOrange, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Greg, I feel really like Nerfod maybe. I feel like my supply chain IQ is notched up a little bit here today.
It's really encouraging to see that there are solutions to problems that Jeff and I have been battling for decades, as I've said. Just a couple, though. No, I mean, if you think about this, and Jeff said it, and several of our listeners have said it, the problem seems so simple.
Yep.
And in truth, it is. There are a lot of false barriers, like the delineation between store ops and e-commerce, that have caused this. And now, with the availability of data and physical technology and software technology to be able to make these things reality, we start to see then, as those things get deployed, we start to see where those false barriers are what's holding us back in terms of the retail industry. So those will come down, as I said, very, very quickly.
Well put. Jeff Cashman, your last thought, and then we're going to sign off.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you guys. I wish I could take a lot of credit for all this brainiac stuff. The reality is I've worked with some really, really smart people and worked with some great customers that have taught me a lot about it. And quite frankly, we're bringing an answer to the marketplace right now it's a must-have.
Yep, agreed.
You're right.
Jeff Cashman with GreyOrange, thanks so much for joining us here today, and we're going to see you next month in one of the next offerings. So thanks so much, Jeff.
See you guys. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, Jeff. See you.
Bye.
Wow. I mean, every time, just when I think I've heard he brings something new, and I guess I feel like I've got so many blind spots, Greg. I don't know. Every time I sit down with Jeff,
I had to compete against that guy for like 15 years, and I got my ass kicked a lot. I mean, actually, very friendly competition. We learned that we pretty much only talked at Christmas at his Christmas party, and not much more than that. But incredibly talented guy, and as he said, he's worked with some of the best in the industry at his previous companies, and there's a lot of good things going on at GreyOrange, right? And as he said, there is no other answer.
Yep.
Right. Robotics has to come. When you compile the greatest generational transformation or transition in the history of the planet, right? The inevitability now of population decline and now physical spacing and potential health issues, there is no other option.
Right.
We have to do it. And we will continue to elevate and enhance work satisfaction for human beings by doing so.
Yep. Well put. Hey, really enjoyed this episode. Really enjoy Jeff's perspective, but also equally enjoyed all the comments and questions and perspective that our audience brought today.
Yeah.
That's makes it really rewarding. As you know, Greg and I host the show, so everyone won today. I want to share a couple things before we sign off, Greg, because we'd love to have that same level of engagement and participation and questions and perspective at a couple of our next events we've got coming up. So this Friday, Greg, we're partnering with U.S. Bank, featuring Bobby Holland and Trent Zuberi with Kraft Heinz. We're going to be talking about the second quarter freight payment index, Greg, and that is this Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, right?
Yeah, this is live. This is July live for us this week. That will be our fourth live stream this week, and U.S. Bank always brings it. The analysis that Bobby does of the data that they gain from processing, I think it's something like $29.8 billion worth of freight transactions every year. The insights that he can provide us from looking at that data over the course of a quarter is really impressive. And I frankly am looking forward to this one because the last one was a bit of a downer.
Right.
I believe that we're starting to see transportation and the economy come back, and I'm hopeful that the data confirms that. So,
and just to clarify, you're talking about the indices we saw, not the perspective that we enjoyed from Bobby Holland, who always brings it.
The data.
Yes, the data. So tune in 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time across all the typical live stream channels. We'd love for you to bring your questions and bring your observations, especially if you ship stuff. And then secondly, we've got a new webinar teed up August 19th. We got Rod Sherkin, Kelly Barner coming back, talking about really a subject matter that's getting a ton of talk, right? Planning for post COVID-19 global supply chain management. However, you're going to get some unique takes, unique perspective, and unique insights from Kelly and Rod, who've been there and done it, especially from a procurement standpoint, which is one of the things that Jeff was talking about, the need to move fast across the board, but including in procurement. So August 19th, you can sign up for that and really check out any of our other programs, live streams, podcasts at supplychainnowradio.com. All right, Greg, before we sign off, your final word.
I'm not kidding. The next time we talk to somebody about warehouse or robotics, we need to have Chris Barnes on camera. I mean, the discussion that he has prompted here is amazing. Retail is changing. Finally, some of what we're doing now and we consider new, I worked for companies that did it let's just say more than 2 decades ago. So it has been done. It hasn't been done in an automation and in an automated way and in real time. And that's a critical thing that Jeff was talking about today, is the real time capability. So no longer will companies be, and Keith Moore alluded to this, no longer will companies be constrained by the accounting system or the ERP that can only batch data.
Yep.
Real-time data will be driving real-time decisions in real time really, really soon.
I love that, Greg. Always ready for a quotable quote. On that note, hopefully to our audience, you enjoyed it as much as we did. What a great conversation. I learned so much, 20 pages of notes over here. But with all that said, best wishes to our audience. Hey, the same challenge we challenge ourselves. We wrap up the show. Hey, do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.